Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Heretical Heathen Podcast. It is I, the Grand Heretic himself, the Heretical Heathen, your neighborhood friendly heretic, Robert Knox. And this week, we're getting back into our scrying sessions. This week gets a little weird. This is going to be an accumulation of multiple sessions over multiple days. This week we are doing the Raidho rune. Now, Raidho looks like a little R, and it's the rune of journey, of moving forward, of that initial step to take when you're doing a new project, and it can be used as such, which maybe I will talk about later. If you're new here, I actually work nights. So on the weekends, my schedule and time itself gets a little strange. I tend to get a giant monster like a good millennial, and I mean a real big one. The white monster, of course. And then I try to keep myself up all night. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but sometimes I end up taking a nap in the middle of the night, and I get to that weird sort of hypnagogic state where you're floating in and out of consciousness. And as I was laying there, having trouble sleeping, I thought, why not try to do my scrying session while laying in bed? So I decided to do that. I set up my temple like I normally do. Obviously, I didn't do any of the preliminary things. I didn't do any of the rituals. I obviously wasn't in my garb or wearing anything in particular. And so I went to my temple and I put Raidho on the door. So as soon as I walked through the door, I found myself on a kind of track, like a race track, and I was looking over in the car next to mine. And I could see somebody, but he was very hard to make out. And this was a track in the middle of a city, a real Ready Player One situation. And suddenly we started driving, and we started racing, and we turned a corner, and in front of me was a giant ramp. And so we started speeding up, and we hit the ramp, and then as soon as I hit the ramp, from below, like a giant gator-like being came up, as if it was trying to swallow us. Again, if you've seen Ready Player One, it's very much similar to this. And we just missed the jaws, or rather, maybe the jaws just missed us, and we turned into birds, and suddenly we were flying high through the sky. And out of nowhere, I sort of got this strange feeling, and I turned back into a man, and suddenly I was free-falling, like right next to a building, falling towards the ground, and just before I was to hit the ground opened up, and I'm back in my temple. Inside my temple space appeared all the normal things. I have a tree, a few animals, notably a panther and a skunk. They were here doing their typical things, just meandering, and suddenly before me, a woman appeared. She was sort of an ashen white, including her long white hair. And I could only see a single eye, which I thought was a bit strange, and this eye wasn't normal. It was larger than a regular eye, and it was shining like the sun. Naturally, I was a bit alarmed, and I decided to try and cast her out. And as I went to cast her out, she leapt forward and kissed me. And then I pulled back, calling on the name of the Most High, to cast out what I thought was a demon, or at least a giant, some kind of negative influence. And then she laughed at me and told me she's not a demon. So I asked, "Who are you then? Or what are you?" And she told me, "You'll find out later." And then she turned around and she walked out. And then I returned back to my body. After laying here for only a moment, I slipped back into vision, and suddenly I was shown 3 cabinets. Sort of like kitchen cabinets, maybe bathroom cabinets, where you would keep a lot of medicines, made of wood, glass on the doors. Maybe even one of those things you'd see in like an old folks' home, where they'd have like all their fine chinas and weird blue bottles. If you're like white in America, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. I swear everyone's like grandma or weird aunt had like a collection of blue cobalt everything for no reason. And in the first cabinet, there was nothing. It was empty. In the second cabinet, Again, it was empty. But the third cabinet had a heart in it. And not like a cartoonish heart. It seemed like a real, like biological heart with like pieces of, let's say, flesh coming off of it. So it looked like there was like a biological system living in this third cabinet. I didn't know what to do about this, and so I made a hammer sign and I blessed it in the name of Thor and asked him to purify it. At which point, the heart became a radiant, bright light, and it filled the cabinet with light. And then again, I was forced back into my body. And to this day, I still don't know what to make of either of those experiences necessarily, especially the cabinet experience. I found that one particularly interesting. So if you have any ideas, leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. I would love to hear what you guys have to think. Now, I waited a few days before I decided to try this again, before I decided to do a proper scrying session. And so about, 4 or 5 days later, I did all the things that I properly do. I set up a vey, I wore the right things, I put on my iron Mjolnir, like a good little mystic. I did my rituals beforehand, sat down, and actually my candle died for this one, which is really annoying. I've been using tea light candles for a lot of things, but I was near the end. And so as I attempted to do this, I was plunged into the darkness, which might actually be better. It seems like it's easier to get imagery in the dark. It's almost like when you're in the dark, your nervous system can't distinguish between what's you and not you, which is why I like dark meditation in general. So if you're trying these scrying sessions, like try them in the dark. Don't make things too bright, even though there is something interesting about the flicker rate of candles and what that does to your brain. As the candles went out and I was plunged into darkness, I set up my temple in the astral, in the imaginal, put Raidho on the door, got up. I spent a lot of time actually trying to feel with my feet what the ground would feel like, including the grass or whatever else happens to be there. Engaging all your senses is really important. But I put the Raidho on the door and I walked through it, and suddenly I found myself in a winter environment. I was a bit concerned because it was cold and the snow was deep. And a figure came by, riding something. For you nerds out there, he kind of looked like he was riding a Tauntaun from Star Wars. And he asked me if I needed a ride or if I needed help. And so I gave the signs I typically give, and this being couldn't reciprocate, and so I denied his help. And then he left. Now before me, there was a big hill, and on top of that hill appeared a red door. And so I got the sense that I was meant to go through this door. So I walked through the snow, and with each step it was sinking up to my knee, which made climbing very difficult. I got all the way up the hill, I got to the door, and then I opened it. And through the door I could see what looked like a bar atmosphere. And so I walked through the door and into the bar. And there were lots of different figures in here. And then I noticed that the spirit from my previous session, the woman of ashen hair, was also in here, and right next to her was an empty bar stool. So I walked up to the bar stool, and I noticed that the bar stool was red. And so was the door. And so this color red seems to be standing out, and I don't yet know why. But I touched the bar stool, noticed the color, and then I sat down. The being behind the bar made several attempts to give me a drink, and all I thought about was fairy lore and how we're not supposed to drink or eat things when we enter the spirit world. And so I explained to him that I am a human and that I cannot do so. And of course, announcing that I'm human, every being in the bar turned its head towards me. And I looked around and said, I know I'm not supposed to be here. And then everyone went back to doing their own thing. So I turned to the woman with ashen hair, and unprompted, she made the sacred signs that I use to test beings in here, and she made them correctly. And so I asked her what she is. And her response was, in my language, she is a spirit. Before I had more time to discuss things with her, the being behind a bar showed me a Widowmaker, which is a drink from where I'm originally from that I happen to be very fond of. It was very clever of him to do so, because I blessed the drink in the name of Thor, and then I took it and I drank it. And upon drinking this drink, like a square patch beneath the stool gave out. The floor gave out, I should say, and I fell. And I fell into darkness. And suddenly a rope appeared, a black rope, which I grabbed. And so I'm now hanging, suspended in darkness. Not knowing what to do, I looked down, and beneath me was a giant row of teeth, like a circular row, almost like a sandworm from Dune. And so I thought to myself, well, if I'm to fall like Gandalf, I might as well go head first. And so I let go of the rope and decided to fall and plunge head first into the mouth of the beast, who then, of course, swallowed me. Though I didn't feel anything, I didn't notice anything strange. Suddenly I found myself standing in utter darkness. But I noticed something interesting. There was water here, or at least a liquid of some sort, barely up to my ankles. And as I'm standing in this watery darkness, the ground before me began to open up. And I noticed there were stairs going down. Obviously a light coming from beneath, or else how could I have seen it? And so I went down the stairs. Getting to the bottom of the stairs, there was a door already opened, and I could see from my side that where they led to was a bedchamber. And in the corner of the bedchamber was a woman, half flesh and half dead. And she was mad. She was angry. She was exceedingly upset to see a human in her area. And I tried to be cool. I tried to play it off and walk around like I'm meant to be there. And I walked over to her bed, and I noticed that she had a red comforter. And so I touched the comforter, at which point her cold hand grabbed my arm, spun me around, and then she began to dance with me. This is really strange. I am not a dancing person. I'm not even like a touchy person. I don't like this. And I thought, like, what the hell is going on? And suddenly she gave me an impression, without words, that before one can really go up, one must first fall. One has to go down into the darkness. At which point she spun me around and pushed me through another door. And beneath the door was nothing. I found myself teetering as if I was in the sky. And then I fell. And I fell again. From air to tree. Or at least what seemed like a tree. Like I was standing on top of a world tree. I was not the only thing on this tree. Before me was a bird of some kind. Maybe an eagle, maybe a falcon. It's very hard to make out. He seemed as though he was waiting for me to get on to him, to mount him, and so that's exactly what I did. And he took me up. He flew high into the sky, and then he turned his head and said it's time for me to go back, at which point he threw me very violently into my sanctuary. And that's where today's scrying session ends. From there, I just returned back, did my normal procedures, and went on about my business. You'll notice if you've been watching some of my other sessions that there seems to be a lot of symbolism of towers and rising up and then going to like the celestial realms. This didn't happen with Raidho. I didn't experience this at all. I had a strange encounter with an ashen woman whose eye shone like the sun. I was plunged headfirst into darkness, swallowed whole, and introduced to the handmaid of hell, the ruler herself, the undead queen, Lady Hell. Maybe. Or maybe it was some other being, but it seemed a lot like that. At which point, like Frodo and Sam, I was sent an air sign, a bird, to bring me back home. And so there's something interesting about the texture of the experience with Raidho. Something about it. It's almost like Raidho was showing me the hero's journey process. Hero starts out, meets a guide, faces the demons, the dragon, the darkness, goes down to the underworld, goes to Mordor, and then is lifted up again by the spirit. And that whole process was captured in Raidho, a process that wasn't there with other runes. And that's something worth at least thinking about. And something about the color red is very important to this rune. Red is typically a color of passion, sometimes can be considered a martial color associated with Mars. Yet there wasn't very much martial energy in this rune. And so we should probably take some time to think about what it is with the color red that is so important to Raidho, or at least my experience of that rune as such. And maybe yours too if you attempt to try these in the future. Perhaps you will notice the same sort of color associations manifest themselves while you step into these worlds. Outside of the visionary experience, outside of my scrying sessions, I noticed some changes in my life as well. I have been kicking around the idea of doing a rune course, and it really finally hit me what I was going to do and the angles I was going to take. There are loads of different modern practices, some of which are aims at reconstructing old practices, but I find most of them to be kind of useless and kind of pointless unless you're like walking the path of the magician. And so I've been trying to put together some sort of preliminary course, like a Rune Magic 101 for the average person. A course that would actually do something for someone. Something that isn't just carve runes in a tablet and put your blood on them or burn them or make a little bind rune sigil. Yes, we can do that too, but I think there's more interesting things we can do. And so during my week of just meditating on the scrying sessions and the rune, I noticed that thing, whatever it is I wanted to do, came into focus. So if you, my lovely heretic listener, have a new project, a new aim, something that you're interested in doing, try calling upon the power of Raidho to push you forward into new horizons, to make those things more clear. And at the very least, it can motivate your lazy ass to actually start walking the path. And for those of you interested in that sort of, let's say, useful, modern rune magic approach, I am still working on it. I'm not sure if I'm going to create like an online course or something like everybody does. Maybe I will. This summer, though, I do plan to teach locally to test the waters, to see how people respond to this sorts of thing. And I happen to think it's probably not going to go very well because everyone wants to do flashy stuff, right? They want to toss runes and read the future, and all that shit's kind of fun, but you get really lost in the sauce really quickly. You sort of get obsessed about the runes and what they mean, and am I going to have a bad day? And maybe that sort of thing, that mental attachment to the divinatory process is exactly the kind of thing that's going to cause you to have a bad day, right? You're going to make it happen, even if it might not have happened otherwise, because you're just constantly thinking, oh shit, I got a Hagalas rune and a Thurasas rune that clearly says I'm going to have a bad day. And you're just going to see it more, even if it's not necessarily there. So I'm going to try to construct something that's a little more useful to people, and I have some ideas again. Now, if you guys like that sort of idea, if you want to hear more, again, leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. Like, let me know, like the podcast. It helps a lot. More likes means I get more reach. More reach means I could potentially monetize this, and then I could spend more time doing this rather than working my muggle job for way too many hours a week. All right, well, I think that's all we have for today. This was kind of a short one. Well, I guess I'm a little over the 20-minute mark, which isn't terrible, but I don't think I have anything else to cover. I hope you guys are enjoying the scrying sessions. I mean, it's not hard to do, but it does take a lot of mental energy and a lot of focus to spend time doing this. And who really knows what I'm potentially opening myself up to? I don't know too many other people going through this process, so I'm kind of treading new water. And maybe there is somebody, if you know anyone who's done anything like this, if you know anyone practicing the Heathen Golden Dawn, send them my way. I would love to have more people to talk to, more people to bounce ideas off of and see what they've gone through. And again, if you're made to the end of the video, do all the things I said to do. Leave a like, leave a comment, share this on all of your socials. Thank you guys for listening, and have a wonderful night.